welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the big ideas sociologists use to understand, well, everything around us. We're talking about the fundamental frameworks that shape how we see the world, from our own families right up to our governments. So, let's just start with a huge question to get our brains warmed up. Why are things the way they are? I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about it? Why do we have certain rules, certain institutions, and why do we all tend to behave in pretty predictable ways? It's a question that has kept thinkers busy for centuries. To even begin to answer that, sociologists use these really powerful tools called theories. Now, don't think of them as these dusty, complicated ideas. It's much simpler than that. Think of them as different sets of blueprints for understanding how our society is built, how it evolves, and what on earth holds it all together. So in this explainer, we're going to dive into the three major schools of thought, or what we call paradigms. The best way to think about them as is three totally different lenses. Each one you look through shows you the exact same world, but it looks completely and totally different. Okay, let's grab that first lens and see what comes into focus. This one's called functionalism. And with this lens on, we're encouraged to see society not just as a bunch of people, but as a single, complex, living thing. The core idea here, the absolute name of the game, is stability. For society to be healthy, it has to be stable. And just like your body has organs, each with a specific job, society has institutions, family, religion, government, and they all have a specific function to keep the entire system running smoothly. Okay, so take the family, for instance. From this functionalist point of view, the family is like the heart of society. It's ground zero for learning the basic rules and values of our culture, and it provides that emotional security that kind of pumps life and purpose into the whole social body. Religion also has a huge role to play. Its function is to reinforce a shared moral code, what sociologists call a collective conscience. By giving us a common set of beliefs, it acts almost like the body's immune system, strengthening social bonds and pulling everyone together. And then, of course, there's the government. You can think of it as the brain. It's the central command center, the thing that organizes society to achieve these huge collective goals, like building roads or providing defense, making sure the whole thing can survive and prosper. And finally, we've got the education system. Its job, well, its main function is to socialize the next generation, pass down the culture, and get them ready to take their specific place in the workforce so they can contribute to the stability of the whole organism. All right, let's put that first lens down and pick up a new one. If functionalism sees a world of harmony and stability, our next lens, well, it shows us a very, very different picture, one full of tension, competition, and struggle. Welcome to conflict theory. This view sees society not as a cooperative body, but as a giant arena where there's a constant competition going on. It argues that different groups, whether based on class or race or gender, are basically locked in this ongoing struggle for limited resources. And that struggle shapes pretty much everything. Now, you've got a couple of giants in this field, and they had slightly different takes. You have Karl Marx, who saw the world's core conflict as a class struggle between the owners and the workers. But then, a bit later, you get Max Weber, and he's like, hold on, it's not just about the money. He argued that conflict could also be about power, social status, and even things like religious ideas. So that's the big idea, but where do we actually see this playing out in our world? Well, this struggle shows up in the exact same institutions we just looked at, but this conflict lens, it reveals a much darker side. Let's go back to education. A conflict theorist would argue that the system isn't just about preparing people for jobs, it's about reinforcing the inequalities that are already there. Things like tracking, where students get sorted into different academic paths, can end up giving kids from wealthy backgrounds a huge head start while getting others ready for lower-paying work. And just look at how this applies to the law. Conflict theory suggests the justice system isn't always blind. As this idea here suggests, the people with power can actually influence what we even define as a crime in the first place, which can create a system that punishes the crimes of the poor way more harshly than the crimes of the powerful. Okay. We've seen the big, zoomed-out picture of society as a stable body and as a competitive arena. So for our final lens, let's zoom all the way in and see how society gets built from the ground up, one tiny interaction at a time. This is symbolic interactionism, and it is all about the micro level. It basically says that society isn't some pre-existing thing that we're all just dropped into. Nope, we build it. We construct it moment by moment through our daily interactions and the shared meanings we give to symbols like words or gestures or even objects. And here's the absolute key. Symbols don't have any meaning on their own. We give them meaning. Right? So think about the symbol on this slide, a dog. For someone who had a dog as their best friend growing up, that symbol might mean loyalty, love, comfort. But for someone who was bitten by a dog as a kid, that very same symbol could mean fear and danger. The meaning is created by us, through our experiences. Now, this theory also has this really cool idea for how we figure out who we even are. It's called the looking glass self. It's basically a 3-step process. First, we imagine how we look to other people. Second, we imagine how they're judging us. And third, we develop our own idea of ourselves, our self-concept, based on what we think their judgments are. In other words, our sense of self isn't something that's just inside us from birth. It's built entirely through social interaction. It's like we're constantly seeing reflections of ourselves in the faces of the people around us, and we're always adjusting who we are based on that feedback, whether it's good or bad. We literally build ourselves in the mirror of society. So there we have it. We've just looked through 3 incredibly powerful lenses. Each one zooms in on a totally different part of our social world, and each one reveals a different but equally important truth. So let's do a super quick recap to bring it all home. You've got functionalism, that big macro-level view, focusing on stability and how all the parts work together. Then you have conflict theory, also macro, but it focuses on inequality and the struggle for resources. And finally, symbolic interactionism, the micro-level view, which is all about how we create meaning in our everyday lives. And that really brings us to the final, most important takeaway. None of these lenses is the right one. Society is stable, and it's also filled with conflict. It's a massive structure, and it's also the product of millions of tiny individual interactions. The real power here doesn't come from picking one lens and sticking with it. It comes from learning how to switch between all 3 to get a richer, more complete understanding of the world. So the question I'll leave you with is this: which lens do you find yourself looking through most often?